we were in this like thrown into the turmoil of my mom dying. Now I know his addiction. I'm pregnant and it's COVID. And what a beautiful introduction you gave about the immunocompromised. I only work with immunocompromised kids. And so the level of terror worldwide was out of control, but certainly locally with the people that had already been living in this world where it was really scary, where you couldn't get your hair cut and all of that kind of stuff. This is where these people are living, trying to save their kids' lives from something totally different than COVID. And all of that was happening at this. And my dog died in the middle of all of that too.
Lindsey Rai Kortan is the CEO of Ronald McDonald House of Omaha, an organization that provides support and healing, hope, and consistency for children and families navigating some of the most devastating moments of their lives. But what sets Lindsey apart isn't just her mission. It's that she has lived this territory. While leading her organization through the daily weight of others' crises, Lindsey was quietly navigating her own domestic violence, her husband's addiction, the unraveling of her marriage, and single parenting two young sons, all while showing up every day as CEO. She is, in every sense of the word, a study in resilience. For 25 years, I have come back to one definition of resilience from Diane Kutu's HBR article, How Resilience Works. And she quotes Dean Becker, who said, more than education, more than experience, more than training, a person's level of resilience will determine who succeeds and who fails. It's true in the cancer ward, it is true in the Olympics, and it's true in the boardroom. So Kutu herself defines resilience as neither ethically good nor bad. It is, and get this, it is simply the skill and capacity to be robust under conditions of enormous stress and change. And Lindsey, we just looked at this and kind of cracked up. That's 25 years old, right? And it is enduring. It is not outdated. So that definition brings me immediately to our guest, Lindsey Rai Kortan, who's CEO of Ronald McDonald House of Omaha. And she leads this organization whose entire purpose is to stand with families fighting for their children's lives in the cancer ward, in the ICU, in the worst moments that they have ever faced. Her job is to build a culture that can be robust under conditions of enormous stress and change, not occasionally, but every single day, 24/7, right? And for me, this is personal because in 2016, my little niece, Allie, she had just turned 12. She was diagnosed with a rare advanced stage pediatric cancer and at the time had a 10% survival rate. Now, in the middle of that, I reached out to Lindsey with a question I desperately needed answered. What separates families who come out of this better rather than bitter? And her answer has stayed with me it's a decade, Lindsey, all these 10 years. It was the support community. So today, Lindsey and I are going to talk a little bit about the role of community in a robust response to enormous stress and change. When that stress touches the people you serve, your organization, and you personally, as an executive. Lindsey, welcome to Your Authentic Executive.
Thank you. I'm so flattered to be here. I can't believe that we've been talking about the same things for as long as we have, really. What a beautiful friendship we have.
Oh, thank you, friend. Thank you. Thank you. Um, Lindsey, most executives that I talk to have experienced a defining season, a moment when they had to lead their organizations while simultaneously navigating something very, very hard personally.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about yours?
Sure. So I would have to say probably 2020, 2021, for me was one of the hardest times, or I would say that's was by far the darkest time of my life. I had found out the unfortunate news that my husband at the time was a very severe addict. And I really thought that we just had more of like domestic violence issues and things like that, but there was much more happening there, and I found that out in the hospital when he was in critical care on life support for the first overdose. And so again, that was in 2020, and it was right around the time that COVID just started sniffing around. It wasn't where everything was closed down quite yet, but something was happening. And then about, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks after he had an overdose in the same room, my mom, who had been receiving cancer treatment for the past like few months or so, was told there's no more options for you. So you need to go on to hospice. And so she moved into the same room where he um, had his overdose and was going to die there. And I also found out that I was pregnant with my second child. And then following that, just before the overdose, my husband and I had already decided to split. So now we were in this, like, thrown into the turmoil of my mom dying. Now I know his addiction. I'm pregnant and it's COVID. And what a beautiful introduction you gave about the immunocompromised. I only work with immunocompromised kids. And so the level of terror worldwide was out of control, but certainly locally with the people that had already been living in this world where it was really scary, where you couldn't get your hair cut and all of that kind of stuff. This is where these people are living, trying to save their kids' lives from something totally different than COVID. And all of that was happening at this. And my dog died in the middle of all of that too.
Oh,
Yeah, so that was pretty pivotal. That was like a pretty pivotal time for me.
holy cow. So that's all in a period of like a year that all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through a little bit about what the process was for you to navigate all of that successfully? I'm thinking about, there's this piece that's navigating it as an executive, right, with an organization. There's a piece of navigating that as a human being, right, as a wife, as a mom, as a daughter. And then there's a piece of it that is navigating your organizational culture in the midst of all of that. And so, Hannah, you were very intentional in your navigate how you have began navigating it and how you're navigating it to this day. Can you share a little bit of that?
Sure. I feel so fortunate because there was a combination of people and things that came together for me that were really influential. So I also have to say that COVID, of all things, was really helpful because I didn't feel like I was on stage going through everything because everyone else's hair was on fire too. So the good news is I could navigate very differently because the responsibilities that I had at work were significantly different and they were new for everyone everywhere. So that provided a little bit more protection as opposed to another um, burden, while we still had the staff that didn't quite know how to do this and navigate through something like this. We actually already had a leg up. We were far luckier than I realized because all we know is immunocompromised kids. So we just added masks to the mix, and we've been doing things 6 feet apart since day one anyway. So I'm fortunate that that's what happened. But at the meantime, had two separate counselors or therapists come forward that were really, really helpful. And one was an addiction specialist so that I understood that part of things. Another one was just a regular therapist so that I could get through that. And I took advantage of both of them. And they weren't, it wasn't breaking the bank. And I knew I was making an investment in pulling myself out of it. And so, because also there was, room and space for everyone who was working here. I felt really supported by the individuals working here at the same time before they knew what was really going on. And then I ultimately ended up going to Al Anon as well. And that's where I learned that. Certainly for addiction, but for a lot of things that are happening that other people's behaviors, I learned the three C's that I didn't cause this, I didn't cure it, I
Mm.
can't cure it, and I can't control it. And so in Al-Anon, I also learned that my life was unmanageable the way that it was. And so taking that information and then having the resources and therapy of knowing what to do with it, and then on top of that, I ultimately decided that it was unsafe for my kids and I to stay in the home and to stay married. Because it took him a lot longer to find his rock bottom, unfortunately. So when I left, I knew that if we litigated through divorce, even though at the time he was not safe to be with the kids, he would never have access to those kids legally. So I said that I feel that there may be a time in the future where he could be healthy. And so I don't want to rip that away from him. I think we should do this collaboratively to the degree that we can. It was extremely difficult because he was active in his addiction. And so it made it really tough. However, one of the things that you're forced to do with the way that I went through collaborative divorce is to get a divorce coach. And then that divorce coach made me pick up teams of people. So it was everything from you need two different homes that you can go to in the middle of the night where no one's going to ask any questions and you can get in. And those are the middle of the night emergency team people. And then you need a group of people who are going to help you in this way and that way. And so I had to develop these teams. I needed help around the house with my kids. I needed help like just maintain staying on top of things that I couldn't. So it's yes, it's a support system. I was saved by a support system, but it was teams of support systems that were put together. So I know that was a really long answer, but there was a lot of people involved that chose to help me when I asked.
It's interesting that there's significant research on and what brought my brain back to it the other day was I was interviewing a woman named Major Baugh, who is in Omaha, who is a Karen refugee, and Karen is a subset of Burmese refugees, and she grew up in a refugee camp. And she talked about how they would just like all of a sudden they'd have to pick up and go and move someplace else. And the whole community, the women in particular, knew what that meant. And it wasn't a big deal. It was like, okay, let's get our stuff. We're moving. Where are we going? And they would just go do it. And it was having that community that responded together that gave them strength. That so there were people who knew how to do it. So if there were new folks there, they would learn how to do it. And everybody was in it together for each other. And there's similar research that comes out of it's either Berkeley or Stanford that talks about the same thing, that it is community that is what holds you together when you're going through trauma, when you're going through these extraordinary crises. And I'm having shared my story, and my story, I can't imagine choosing to clam up and not and not open up to community to help. I can't imagine making that choice because it other people want to help. Other people want to be part of the solution, want to be part of it, and that's what makes us feel more whole as we're going through the process. You described this group a couple years ago as your tribe, that you had a tribe that was essential. Everything from food and food prep to watching the kids and driving the kids and cleaning the house. And I'm sure, knowing you, that you probably also have personal fitness and wellness kind of things built into that, and
Yeah,
a sleep coach. Anyway,
yeah, yeah.
you shared that there was something pivotal that happened when you were finally able to have cameras face outward.
Yeah.
Can
And
you unpack that?
yeah, and I can. it's easy for us, for both of us who have a real faith and we lean on the community. It's easy for us to say, I can't imagine not having that. But the reason that people don't lean into community and the reason that I had to be told that this is what I needed to do, I didn't do this on my own, is because there's a lot of shame. There is
Mhm.
shame that goes along with things that are not going well. And I I sh that none of this should have been happening to me. So why would I even need a community? I've been doing things by myself on my own for so long. But it's shame. Shame will be the reason that keeps you there because you're afraid. It's not, you don't go in. I don't think everybody thinks, gosh, I know there's this community of people that are totally dying to help me. It's when you're the people
Yeah, yeah,
pleaser, like
yeah.
you're on the other side of that. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on that.
That's interesting. So even with my stuff, with our cancer journeys and dad dying and hurricanes,
Yeah.
um, I had one client that I went on site to do some work in another state, and it was just a couple weeks after I had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And they were very dear to me. We're very close, and worked with them for several years. And I remember my primary contact there saying, "Hey, can I share this with the CEO?" And I remember that, they are not personal sharing story kind of culture. It's a kind of a macho, get the work done, roll up your sleeves culture. And I said, please, please don't. I'm not ready yet because I'm afraid he'll think I have cooties if this is yet another thing that's happening. And
Yeah.
I've never shared it with. It's interesting. I've been thinking about what is the effect. So even having shame over the feeling that people might see me as a magnet for crisis, as opposed to and
Oh,
goodness, isn't
interesting.
that something we just kind of have to put on our big girl pants and um,
Yeah. That's
get through?
interesting that that's your takeaway. I often think that because of the things that happened, I attract people in their darkest hour, but that's when I
Mm.
do my best. And so I may wonder if that's the same for you.
Oh, I am. That's
It's not
my
that you're
home run
attracting
pitch.
crisis. You're just the
Yeah,
best in people's darkest hour.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. That's what your work is, and that's my
Yeah.
sweet spot with my coaching. So tell us a little bit more then about this, when you were finally able
Yeah.
to turn the cameras outside and what that means.
So, so there was three different groups of people who came together, in a sort of intervention from me saying, if you don't get out of the, like, we're watching you slowly fade away. And I felt very strongly that I only had two choices. I was either going to die by killing myself, dying by accident or on purpose with the situation that I was living in, or I was going to inadvertently kill my, I had stopped eating, I like all of that. So,
Mm,
one of the people who, groups that came in really really focused on my safety. And so that was when, and I had to admit, this was the first time I had to admit that I don't know what I need. I don't even know how to put one foot in front of the other, and that was a very very vulnerable place for me to be, but it was authentic. And that it was
mm,
when the tribes started to show up differently. And so in that case, that particular friend group said, not only do we need cameras all over the inside of your house because no one, like someone needs to know what is happening and so that you have some help there. And also, I think we should get you some protection. So that was when the cameras went in, and then there was a bodyguard that helped me out a ton that just kept me safe. But then when I finally moved out, I created and designed a life that I knew what to expect when I came home and just changed all of and learned what boundaries were, because there's a lot of things that you can say about what everybody else is doing, but I became enmeshed with it because I had very, very weak boundaries, and
mm,
I wanted to be loved so badly by someone who was not available for that love, that I was willing to be really stupid with a lot of my decisions and choices. And that's
mm,
what my role in a lot of ways enabled myself and others to be. part of my situation. But anyway, once I got out of that and I was in a different home and I didn't need the bodyguard as much anymore, I will never forget the moment that, again, I'm all the things that are the worst, right? My mom's dead. I'm an only child raised by a single mom, so like that's my whole family gone. And the one person that I'm not from Nebraska, so now the family that I married into gone. I'm raising two babies by myself. So any help that I had relative to what his family was provided, gone, all of it gone. Um, however, however, when everything normalized. And even though all of those things were gone, it was the most serene and comfortable and consistent my life had been in a really long time. And it became safe to the point where I could turn the cameras away from what was going on inside the house and could face them outside.
Mm.
And that was, for obvious reasons, really monumental for me because I no longer had to be afraid of what I was bringing into the table because
Mm.
you can place a lot of blame on a lot of behaviors and all of that, but what you allow, you teach. And I taught everybody around me that it was okay to take advantage of me and it was okay for me to live this very frightening lifestyle and it was never okay. That's nobody else's fault but mine. So that's why that was really big, that no longer am I, it's not the person I was living with. It was the person who was living with me that I couldn't bet on myself that I wasn't going to allow that kind of toxicity to come in. But not anymore. And I have a beautiful co-parenting relationship with him. And even though my mom's dead, I've got a great relationship with her too. And yeah, my whole life is completely different. But I would never, ever have gotten through it if it wasn't for the people around me that chose to stay around me for all of that.
Mm. Mm. And you have shared um, that you've gained some insight on some intergenerational things, that there's some wonderful things you've learned from your mom, and there were some things that really needed to be unlearned.
Yeah.
Can you unpack what that journey was like for you?
Yeah, so it's really interesting being a woman who was raised by a woman who was a boss. I mean, she got up, she suited up, she ran what she was the head of whatever it was that she was running, that she didn't take any time off, and she really taught me the value of work ethic and that there is nothing stopping you from being the boss, not your gender, not anything. Like you're the only thing in your own way. And so I really took to that. So as it pertains to work, I've had a very specific way that I like to do things and like the drive and the grit and all of that. But I also picked up on all of the other stuff that she did too relative to toxic relationships. And I adopted all of those qualities and emulated a lot of the same things that she did. Now I feel really confident that the cycle has been broken relative to the things that were going on that were toxic, um, with relevance to relationships and things like that. But I will say that the drive, the work ethic, you sit down in that seat and you outwork everybody no matter what, and your value is placed on the labor that you can provide. I do believe that that is how we had to act. I feel like as women, we had to be that way, and it was imperative. And I think that that mentality is what got me to where I'm at right now. I
Mm.
do not think that that is the way of the future, but I do think that that was appropriate for the time being, and I understand why we all did that. Now, I don't believe in pretty much anything that I said that got me here. I don't think that anybody's value, I think it's antiquated to believe that anybody's value is relative to how many hours they put in. If you're working a ton of hours, it's because you're either unorganized or you don't know what you're doing. And I'm guilty of both. So you always know but there's no awards for that with me. There's no like, no one's gonna give you kudos or a raise or whatever. Kudos to you for figuring it out. That's awesome. I hope that your next flex is that you're able to do your job without staying here until midnight. Like this is realistic.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because we're open 24/7, 365. I have a very different view on all of that. The job is to get the job done. And what I would prefer is that everybody stays centered and is able to handle life as it comes so that we can stay well and peaceful enough to help everybody else who is here. If we don't have that flexibility, it won't work for the future, I don't think. It's a much more flexible world that we live in now, and none of the things that brought me here are the same things that I've pushed out to everybody else. And so our policies have changed significantly because of this, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. I'm finishing up revising a syllabus and course for a change leadership um, course that I've taught for Creighton's MBA program for over a decade. And it's interesting that the primary text or content, I can no longer use textbooks for things that talk about change processes and best practices, and that everything is changing so quickly now that the whole construct of what are we going to learn, how are we going to learn about it, has to adapt every year because things are changing. The rate of change is
Yeah.
happening so quickly. And so, what you've shared is a perfect transition for kind of my next question, which is how did you create an organizational culture and an environment that not just supported you as you went through this, but I'm sure that that informed the culture that you provide to the folks who are living at the Ronald McDonald House. And we had an opportunity to live at a Ronald McDonald House around every one of my niece's
Yeah.
rounds of radiation in Chicago, and it's a profound experience. And so, for to provide what folks like me received as a family member there, something has to happen at the staff level and the culture level to be able to deliver that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I would love to. I feel really fortunate. There was a year that we had a board chair who happens to be the individual that does the majority of the surgeries on the kids for transplant. He's like one of
Oh,
the top surgeons in the United States, and he was our president at the time. And and by at the time, I mean, I don't know, years ago, years and years ago. And he's from Canada. So his view on culture is very different than what the United States culture was. And he said to me, I don't care what you have to do, but make this the best place that anyone has ever worked before. And that was right up my alley in terms of a challenge. So prior to all of these things happening, I didn't have any handcuffs to try things that were um, outside of what the norm has been for all of us that did not come up in that environment. So the first thing that I did was put in the infant network program, and that allowed anyone who had a baby to bring their baby to work for the first year. It sounds totally counterproductive, but it was just the opposite. And we've now had one, two, three, four, five, six, and then we've got another one on the way. Six babies have spent the first year of their life here. And every one of their parents, including one of the dads, except for one, is still here after all of that. And so I think that that speaks volume. And now the one who started, he's now 9, and we're all still here. So like it's been and that's just one example that of things that we did that were a little bit different, a little bit more seemingly progressive at the time, and all of that. So I we were already set up to be a little bit different. But then when all of this stuff started happening with me and the cascade of things that started happening to other people on the staff after this started happening with me is was cataclysmic in a lot of ways. I just happened to be the first. Thank God, because I was also in a position to do things to allow for everybody to go through whatever they are going through. So as my mom was dying and I was dealing with the chaos of addiction and divorce, all of that stuff. There were so many competing priorities that I had to be honest about what was going on. I weighed 25 pounds less than I do right now. My hair was falling out. My bones were showing. And I love these people. We're not just coworkers. I love these people. So I came forward and said, I need to be a little bit vulnerable and tell you that there are some things that are happening to me that are making me question whether or not I can do this job. because I don't know how to be here in the same way that I always have before while these other things are happening and my world is on fire. And I hate that I'm even saying this because it's on fire for everybody right now because again, it happens to be in the middle of COVID. And so at that point, everyone decided I'm going to come forward and I'm going to be equal. I'm going to match the vulnerability that she's asking me to have. And I too am going to say when things are not okay. And together we created an environment where it was okay to not be okay. And then out of that also grew some nuanced things that we do. So we don't, and I've talked about this on a panel for you before too, that we never start a business meeting unless you disclose how you're doing physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually or socially. And that sets the tone so that everybody knows who they're talking to. We also have implemented something, and this was a result of me not even realizing it. And I took this from another nonprofit. We've implemented 8 weeks of compassion leave. So, regardless of your position, if you need 8 weeks, you take 8 weeks, and any version, and it's all paid, and that's on top of unlimited PTO. We have that too. There's no sick days. You need the time, you take the time. Gone are the days where we are interested in micromanaging anybody's specific performance because you agree by working here that you're going to do all of the goals that you agreed to. All of us are relying on you. No one is going to tell you ever that the death that you experienced with someone that is close to you, but in the handbook isn't one of the listed people that you're allowed to
Mm.
grieve for. And when you do, you get 3 days. That is total BS. Like I can't, and so and we just do it, right? Like and so that's again, that's just one example. So all of we agreed we're all going to come in together, and then 3 months later, my colleague's brother died unexpectedly, and then my other colleague's mom got the same type of cancer, and she lost her mom, and then we hired somebody else who lost their stepdad, and then one of our own got really sick, and I mean it was just this cascade of really horrible things that were happening. But because we opened the window to have a psychologically, truly psychologically safe space where it was okay to say, I am not doing great, I'm disclosing that here, we leaned in for each other in a way that I've never seen before. Our turnover is incredibly low. We have an understanding of what it feels like to have your world fall apart and now you're in a place that you've never been before because we allow ourselves to walk through that before we walk out to a family and give any kind of support, because if we are not centered, we have no business giving advice to somebody else who isn't either. That's like the dogs giving each other permission to get on the couch. Do you know what I mean? Like we're just it's just ridiculous. So it's helped a ton. Um, for all of us, I think.
I told you that I might grab my brain while we're talking. And from a neuroscience or a brain perspective, when crisis is happening, our brains go into threat mode, and we are naturally both afraid and ready to,
Yeah,
so fight, flight, freeze, those things are happening. And when that happens, we lose access to our what's called executive
right.
functioning, our prefrontal cortex, because everything in the middle of our brain, all this colored stuff, is like firing,
Yeah.
firing. And if our limbic system, which is often the amygdala is a part of that we hear about, if that system is arm wrestling with our very delicate prefrontal cortex, our executive functioning, where we make decisions, where our logic resides, if those two are arm wrestling, the emotional center will win every time.
Totally.
And so, in fact, if you are triggered in a meeting and emotionally have a response, it can take 20 minutes to regain access to your prefrontal cortex. And one of the
And
things
that's
I like,
pretty fast too. And
and,
yeah,
and we don't know it. Interestingly, people think, "Oh, I'm containing it," and I like to say, and everybody else sees it. So we end up being a little bit clueless. And so, what you've done through some of these policies and procedures and trust
Mhm.
in the system is you've said, I don't want you to be afraid for your job.
Right.
I don't, this is not a threat in your life. You've got enough other things going on right now. I want you to bring the whole of who you are so you can do your best work, so you can care for these people who need you. And you've removed that threat factor in very concrete, reliable ways. And my hunch is that what's happening is you've got people who are showing up, and your productivity and some of that kind of stuff it is probably quite extraordinary right
It
now
is. Yeah,
with the staff.
totally. And this is with like everybody going through something pretty monumental, and that hasn't changed. It's just increased, you know. And so just to piggyback off of what you're saying, you can't get from your lizard brain to, you can't make that jump anyway. You stack the opportunity to be able to have access to that prefrontal cortex. And I believe that the fastest way for you to get there is when someone else exercises empathy. And it doesn't mean that they have to feel sorry for you, but they have to understand where it is that you're coming from. And that is one of the most disarming things that can happen. And then you have access to the prefrontal cortex where all of the good stuff is. And it's not just about, it is certainly about everyone here being able to show up for the families, but it's modeling how to show up. It's one thing to spit out a bunch of things that you've learned and all of that. But unless you're truly able to get there on your own and you know what you need, there's no way that you're going to be able to authentically help somebody else. So it's really the modeling of it too. It's not
Mm.
just the like being able to say the right things. Like I want everyone here to show this is what I do when things are not working for me, and this is how I show up when they are. And to do that for all of these people that are just looking for someone to lead them because everything is up in the air. I think that really helps.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I, I'm 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 thinking about how, that question I asked you 10 years ago about what does success look like, or what fuels successful outcomes, not necessarily outcomes from the medical condition, because we have less control over that, but you just hear story after story of families breaking apart when they go through crisis and all kinds of, like, so what fuels that sense of being together at the end of hard as opposed to bitter at the end of hard? And I'm curious, what happens to families? What does it look like when that community isn't there?
That's really hard for me to answer because we wouldn't know unless they, and we do have a lot of lifetime care, so they come back and forth, and some, a lot of times you can see there's couples that are together that they shouldn't have been together. It just so happens that they had a child together and everybody's
Mm.
kind of on a
Yep.
different path. But because we don't know what happens when you leave this cocoon of support, our job is to empower every single person in that family to be able to take life as it comes. And we are
Mm.
modeling what it looks like to take life as it comes so that no matter what happens when you go home, you are far better equipped, independent of whatever the outcome medically has been, to take it on. And so
Mm.
that if we can do that, whether you're here with us for one day or a year, then we did our job. But we have to model that. It cannot be lip service. That's ridiculous. Can you imagine telling someone how to navigate the like some catastrophic event with their child who may not make it, and they don't know if their child's going to make it until Friday, and then just be like, let me give you like let me read you a couple things that I read out. You can't. You got to live it. You got to live it. You got to be able to say that really sucks and get where they're at and then meet them there and then go towards empowerment, because otherwise that's the best gift that we can give. That's the best gift that anyone's ever given us. That's what all of this stuff gave me.
You're talking about personal agency, right? You're
Yeah.
talking about two things. You're talking about, and this has been the old the older I get. I turned 64 in a few days, and it's like did I tell you what I've asked everyone to do for my birthday? I've asked them
Yes.
to take the
Yes.
lyrics when I'm 64 and
Yes.
rewrite them and sing it to me. So we'll see if I get any right. But anyway, um, uh, it has been interesting, and then marrying at almost 50 for the first time into a relationship that had a couple of
Sure.
more grown kids, and learning the patience of freedom for people to do things in their time and to make their decisions in their time, and the beauty of when someone finally chooses to come to you and say, hey, help me make this decision or help me think this through. And I remember when my husband's next oldest brother died. There's a, I don't know, a 12-year gap. So this, he almost fathered him in many ways. And we would be driving down the highway, and all of a sudden my husband would start crying. And I'd say, honey, what's going on? And he would say, I miss my brother, completely out of the blue. So there are some things you just can't program. You've got to create freedom. At the same time, there are some people who can get stuck
Mm-hmm.
because they're not demonstrating personal agency, because they're not making choices on how to navigate things. And that's a little bit more of a complex situation. But what I'm hearing you say is we are going to be an environment that says our norm isn't a policy and procedure with steps. Our norm is to be there for one another. And if Lindsey has something going on, in fact, you just told a story of something that happened with your kid that got sick.
Yeah.
And go ahead. Can you share that story real quick?
Just this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was, again, there's not a parent that this doesn't resonate with. I have three meetings in the morning, a lunch meeting, and then another meeting in the afternoon, and then baseball practice after that. So typical Tuesday. No, like no, nothing major. But we're also in summer, so we don't go to school. We go to soccer camp, but we wake up. One of them, his voice is gone. He's stuffy. He has a cough. What the heck? So now that's those three meetings gone. I can't do anything. I got to get one to soccer practice, and he's throwing a fit because he doesn't want to go if the other one doesn't have to go, even though the other one is sick. And so I needed a ton of grace, because it was every meeting where there was an opportunity for me to learn something, do something, help make something happen, and I wasn't able to come through on any of that. Um, and then I got to spend the time with him, and now he's fine and we're fine. I don't have to worry a couple different things. I don't have to worry about everything falling apart. I don't have to worry about feeling like I didn't do my job. And it's all going to be fine. Everything is going to be fine. But if I didn't allow for that openness to be there for myself, how can I possibly force anybody to do the same thing? How can we possibly can you imagine if we walked out, if I walked out of my office and I told one of the families who are staying with us, listen, I know they've got appointments, okay? But like you haven't worked in 3 weeks. Like, can you imagine? Like, but we would do that to ourselves because somehow we feel like, well, we shouldn't be able to be given the same. But if I'm going to ask for it or even admit that I do need it, there's no reason that everybody else shouldn't have that same privilege. So that's why it's going to be just fine. No one's freaking out about any of the meetings that got lost because we're talented enough to get by without one person being there for a day or 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, and nobody else is trying to control you. So that's just, and that was just yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a wonderful quote by Ken Blanchard, and Ken Blanchard wrote The 1 Minute Manager that I don't 10 years ago most people would have heard about it. I don't know about it today, but anyway, um, he this quote stands true, and it's so hard for many leaders to wrap their brains around. And it is the most important part of leadership is not what happens when you're there;
Yeah.
it's what happens when you're not there.
Is this the same guy that said how like you'd think the CEO or the CFO or whoever, someone in the C-suite has the most important job, but how does everybody feel when the janitor doesn't come for a week and now all of a sudden that's the most important? It's so true. And same with like NASA saying we're all here to send a man to the moon. It's the
Yeah,
same. It's the
yeah.
same.
And
Yeah.
and what's interesting to me is, in my coaching experience, when folks make themselves so invaluable that they can't go on a vacation, or can't take a break, that it says more about the culture that they've chosen to create
Mhm.
as opposed to there actually being in this, it's self-inflicted
I agree.
um,
I do think that there's a
dependent.
lot of organizations and companies that are antiquated and still feel like and I think, in a lot of ways globally, I think that the Ronald McDonald House still suffers from outdated ways of thinking like that too. And like people that I really respect and admire just believe that you should just shut up and do your job. And I think that is far more the norm than it isn't. But I do think that because is slowly becoming the new church, if we are all
Mm,
coming in with a priority for shared values and shared ideals and how we treat people and how we treat each other and how we're all individuals first before we're employees, same with the people we work for, they're all individuals first before they're your client or your guest or your whatever. And it just changes the entire dynamic. And I would have to say, I would go head to head with anybody relative to how happy the people are who work there, including myself, and how
mm,
willing they are to do things for each other, for the organization, and the passion for who they are as individuals and finding that through their career. I'll go to the mat with anybody with this culture anytime. And
mm.
I'm so confident in the way that this team functions that I believe that we could go into just about any industry and be like, okay, we're your team. Just tell us what the goals are. We've got it. Because there's everything can be taught except for the things that we had to learn. Does that make sense?
It,
Like we had to learn
absolutely.
differently than
Yeah,
it's
and
not a skill. Yeah.
yeah, the rules are so different now, and I mean, we just had so much disruption in the last. I'm just going to say, since COVID, just a good line in the sand.
Sure.
There's just been so much disruption, and we just don't know. And I have such great trust in the generations that follow to figure this all out, like they have figured other things out. Um, and and you talked about the happiness of your people, and we often think that happy is separate, and some of the research shows happy isn't what it's about purpose and meaning, that's far more sustainable for human beings. But that I'll use happy that happy employees and great work and meeting your goals are two separate things,
Yep.
and in fact they're very much interrelated, that
Yep.
they are that if we've got an organization that is aligned, that we know where we're going, that everybody knows how they're contributing to the organization's purpose, that we know that we have one another's back, and we do that in practical ways, not just I got your back, but there are real
Right.
practical ways that when you needed to take the day off to take care of your son, you had no question that everybody was going to stand up for you and figure it out.
Sure.
And
Yeah, of course.
that's
I would
just,
be such a loser instead of a leader if like I just can't if I or anybody, me or anybody, like I would still be a loser if it wasn't me. If one person leaving for a couple of days or they need some time, a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, and we are so unorganized that we're gonna crumble if I'm not around, then I like that is someone there is a loser and it's probably the person at the top. Like because
that,
really other it's just about control. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Are you gonna really fall apart if you're when you're done complaining about Gen Z wanting to go home because the vibes are off and they need a couple of days because you think that they should put their head down and work. When you're done complaining, how much was actually lost? Because all you did, like, you didn't lose anything and they gained everything. You gave them the opportunity to be a human being for once.
It's interesting. I love what you just said.
Yeah.
And I believe at our core that people really love making a difference. They love contributing to something that's purposeful, that
Yeah.
there is a human desire to do that and to earn income, and then there's when I go back and I look at when I was in my 20s, and I think I knew so much. you know
Yeah.
like we're all idealistic at that era, and we
Totally.
all
Yeah.
think
Thank
everybody
God.
else doesn't understand and doesn't
Yes.
know what's going on. And then all of a sudden you want to have a family, you want to have a car, you want to have sustain. Oh, maybe I actually do need to do some work to contribute to, and
Yeah.
it happens. And so it's just interesting, the need to have patience
Mm,
with others. And I think also it's really important, and you brought this up a couple of times, of how are we modeling
yeah.
what it means to do all of that. And when COVID hit, I kept hearing work-life balance, this teeter-totter, work-life balance. And Patrick Lencioni at the time, the death by meetings guy, um, he said, if we've learned anything, there's no such thing as work-life balance because everybody's work was at home. How do you
It's
figure that
all
out?
life. Just sometimes
Yeah.
we spend it working. It's all life. There is no such thing as work-life balance. It's all life.
And Deloitte came out with some research
Interesting.
that I loved. And they said, don't use that term because usually when work-life balance is used, it is I want my company to make decisions that let me leave and have balance.
Mhm.
And it's a policy that I want. And what they said in 2020 was what work-life balance should be replaced with is well-being.
Yeah, I
And that
totally agree with that.
well-being is a
Yep.
conversation that we have with our manager, with others to say, what does that look like for me? Because it might look very different for me than it looks like for somebody else. And we have to figure that
Sure.
out.
Yeah.
So I like that. And I like if I start to kind of wrap up our conversation where we go from what happens when you're going through absolute hell as a human being and if anyone who comes to Omaha, Nebraska, learns about Lindsey Rai Kortan, that you are a premier leader, you are respected, highly regarded, you are a presence in the community. People long to serve with your organization because they know there's something good there, and that's something that you shape. And to have that presence when behind the scenes your world is completely falling apart with the things that are the most icky, horrible things in life that one would go through, and to see that strength kind of, it's not complimented, it's alongside all of this hard that we would never know. And so your willingness to share your story helps people say, and I guess I would add a caveat that going through hard and being transparent about it, you've got to be wise in the community you do that in. That not every community will have. We both are kind of able to shape and lead our community, and so you want to be wise about how you do it. But that is the healthiest way to go through hard, is that transparency. Does that make sense?
Yes, you said so many different things, and I think the one, if I were to tie a bow on everything that you're saying, and there's a lot of gems in there, is allowing space for authenticity because there's so much in the workplace. You are forced to do something. You're forced to sort of, whether it's perceived or otherwise, right? There's a feeling that you're forced to just sort of shut up and do the work and compartmentalize it. And with what you're saying, it's an opportunity to allow for vulnerability, to allow for a different way of thinking, a different type of accountability. It's a very different type of accountability. If you are accountable for your own wellness, and that's a bigger flex than anything else, then your entire narrative about how you conduct your life inside and outside of work has to change. And so it's a measurement, not so much of like reviews used to be, some of them are still, but like, what did you do? What could you do better? And you wait till the end of the year to do that. And again, I think that's very antiquated. If we're going to expect everybody else to run at problems, we need to run at our own problems internally too. And that is another marker of it.
Mm.
But in order to do that, we have to be authentic in the way that we're delivering our message, because I do think that the way that it has been, if you wait to give someone a review or feedback or say like, hey, I don't know what's going on in your life right now. I just know that you suck at your job. Like that's you're not help there's no help in that.
Mm.
And you're being kind of a jerk as opposed to exercising compassion and empathy um and there is profound results on the end of that. When people want to do something and they're inspired to work wherever they're at because they have the right environment that complements what they can really do in the way that they can do it, it's no longer motivation where you're being pushed. You're inspired to bring things to the
Mm.
table. So I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
authenticity is like really what I'm hearing you say.
The word that, so I guess I'll say two things. The phrase that came to mind while you were talking was we often, I'll be coaching a leader who is frustrated because their team members don't seem to care. They aren't remembering, coming back and doing things. They have to keep following up on everything. And the feeling is like they just don't care. Often it is attributed to the Generation Zers as well, which is, interesting. And, and what you're, what the conversation is shaping is a little bit around what does mutual care look like? That I want you to care and I care. And it's not, and I don't think it can be sequential. I'm not going to care until you show you care. It's how do we shape a culture that cares about our work? We care about our human beings. We care about the people that we're serving, whether, it's my husband and I, we design auto dealerships, and like auto dealerships are what get moms to soccer games and moms and dads to work. And I mean, all of that stuff. And so like, there's nobility in those things. How do we care about the whole of the person and what we're doing, who we're doing it for? And that's a mutual kind of a mutual relationship. I don't know. You've
It still
shaped a
has
really
to lead
nice
with it.
model.
It comes from the top. It
Yeah,
will always come from the top. If not, and again, that was a lesson that I learned too, because we put in unlimited PTO, for example, but I never took it. And so no one ever took it. And it wasn't until I had a brave colleague come and say, listen, you have to go first. And I should have no problem going first. And so just like how we've come a long way since then, but I had to model it and then others had to model what I was doing. And so it has to come from one person who is the most influential, and that's what will change everything. But
yep,
there
yep,
will be a moment of change. And just like with change, there's always growing pains and where the lines are, and you
yep,
immediately figure that out.
yep.
Um, and in providing that much freedom, which allowed for mutual compassion to exist, everybody also learned how to monitor themselves in a very different way. So it just
Mm.
eliminated micromanaging, because we can do all of this, but we just have to get the job done that we all agree to at the beginning of the year. And so it just changed the level of freedom that everyone gave for each other and understanding. Every single person, there's not one person here who could have said, well, I can't believe they took the time off. I would never. Every single person has been hit with something that was huge in their world where they had to ask for grace and understanding and giving updates and things like that. So it's been really, really beneficial for all of us.
Mm.
But it has to
Mm.
come from one person who has the most influence to start. That's how it happens.
So, Lindsay, I guess I'll just share with the folks who are watching or listening that Lindsay and I have conversations like this. Whenever we cannot talk for 3 years, and then all of a sudden we just do a deep
Yeah.
dive into a conversation, and we could go on. So I want to kind of wrap it up and come back to where we started. When Dean Becker, who said more than education, more than experience, more than training, it's resilience that determines who succeeds and who fails. But Kutu's deeper point is that resilience isn't something that you either have or you don't have. You build it, you practice it. And Lindsay has shown us today it is never built alone.
Oh God, no.
So, my little niece, Allie, who we talked about at the opening, she graduated from Northwestern this week.
Wow.
And we're celebrating that and her 10-year cancer-free celebration.
Cool.
And the community's coming together. The community that walked with her is celebrating that together. And when I think about what made that possible, the community that held her family, the support that surrounded them in the hardest moments, I always think about organizations like the Ronald McDonald House of Omaha and leaders like Lindsay who show up not just to run them, but to embody what they stand for. And so, Lindsey, thanks for your transparency, your courage, the extraordinary work that you do for families in their most vulnerable moments, and for the team members who serve with Ronald McDonald House who are going through their most vulnerable moments as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What a gift. Thank you.